Vice President J.D. Vance signaling over the weekend that the president was not opposed to invoking the Insurrection Act in his effort to deploy the U.S. military in American cities for law enforcement purposes. Former President Barack Obama weighing in today. He had a warning about what he believes would be the broader consequences of that action.
When you have military that can direct force against their own people, that is inherently corrupting. When you have what looks like a deliberate end run around not just a concept, but a law that's been around for a long time, posse comitatus, that says, you don't use our military on domestic soil unless there is an extraordinary emergency of some sort. That when you see an administration suggest that ordinary street crime is an insurrection or
a terrorist act,
that is a genuine effort to weaken how we have understood democracy.
All right, joining us now in the arena, CNN legal analyst Elliot Williams and CNN chief national affairs correspondent Jeff Zeleny are here. Scott and Jamal remain with us as well. The text chain is also joining us there on the left side of your screen. They're going to have additional analysis for you while we continue to chat here. Jeff Zeleny, you covered Obama's entire campaign, right? And I'm struck by the contrast of the candidate that we saw in 2008 and the energy there and sort of the laconic stylings of the now former president and the way he is coming across. He has not said a lot. That was more than really he has said in the past about the country, the president, and what he clearly seems to think is a slide toward authoritarianism. What do you make of his decision to kind of enter the chat in this way, so to speak, and the message that he has?
Look, he's been doing it with increasing frequency after being relatively silent throughout much of the first Trump administration. Obviously, during the Biden years, it was a little awkward for him to speak out. He's been speaking out much more this year, I think, than he probably has over the last almost 8 years combined. Look, he came across as more a professorial, Barack Obama, a little bit above it, taking a look at it. What I was most struck by was his sort of admonition to progressives. And that reminds me of something that we heard from him actually pretty frequently. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. He said this, I'd say you can't just be a scold all the time. And he said progressives have a holier than thou superiority. So yes, he has some strong words to say for President Trump and the state in which the country finds itself, but also a little bit of tough medicine for Democrats and progressives as well. So I thought that was that's probably his biggest contribution to the chat, if you will, as Democrats try and rebuild themselves and rebuild their party out of the wilderness. He's trying to be pretty, trying to put his thumb on the scale in terms of the direction of the party.
Is he right, Jamal?
Well, first of all, I think he's back in his office. What's with the muted tan tones? The Oval Office looked that way too.
So, I mean, it's like the beige suit became a room.
I never liked it. Listen, he is saying what is on a lot of people's minds about getting out there and talking about the creeping authoritarianism that people feel is happening in the country. One thing about Barack Obama today is that he has a lot more freedom to be able to speak out. He's a president, so he has immunity. So Donald Trump actually can't attack Barack Obama with his legal forces the way he's doing with other political opponents. That's not insignificant. And so the president, I think, has to step up and speak out in a way that maybe some other Democrats won't be able to. But I did learn this when I worked for Bill Clinton as a kid, which is it takes a horse to beat a horse. And I think this is what Barack Obama is talking about. Put your own ideas on the track, get them out there, let people judge them versus Donald Trump's, not just be a scold about how bad Trump is.
Scott?
Yeah, I mean, he's been the most hyper-political and hyper-partisan post-president we've ever had. He's still acting that way. They're not over the fact that Donald Trump won the national popular vote last year. And they keep warning about the same things that they were warning and fussing about during the campaign, to which the American people then responded to. I think Donald Trump is executing every part of his agenda in almost exactly the way that he promised he was going to. up to and including enforcing laws in the United States that have been on the books for a very, very long time that his predecessor chose simply not to execute. You throw that on top of the fact that he's having this extraordinary success on the world stage, and I just think Democrats from Obama on down are having a heck of a time understanding where they went wrong and how Donald Trump has captivated a nation and now the entire world.
Elliot, how do you see this from a legal perspective?
Well, I think there's no doubt that authoritarianism is on the rise around the globe. Just look at the kinds of folks who have taken power in the last decade, from Belarus to El Salvador, Bukele, and Viktor Orban in Hungary, and on and on and on. They also happen to be often folks that the president speaks about favorably. Like that's a fact. That's not a criticism of Donald Trump. And I just think the kinds of things that have made those men so powerful are the kinds of things we ought to be careful about embracing here in the United States, like firing prosecutors. And some of the other acts that might seem good and might seem wonderful on a gut level to many people, but are profoundly dangerous for the rule of law in the country. And I just think when you strip down the politics out of Obama's statements, like he's not making an untrue point about authoritarianism around the world and what we ought to be cautious of in the United States.
Yeah, so speaking of this, I want to play a little bit of what the former president put out. We saw him on a podcast that was released in the last day or so. This was at the Obama Foundation, or for the Obama Foundation, over the weekend on Saturday, where he's talking about how basically the United States isn't immune, even though perhaps many people in the United States thought that the U.S. was immune. Let's watch.
Like many of you, I've become increasingly concerned about the rising wave of authoritarianism sweeping the globe. We're seeing politicians target civil society, undermine freedom of the press, weaponize the justice system. And no one is being spared. Even countries that thought they were immune from wholesale assaults on democracy now understand we're all part of this struggle.
I will admit, Jeff, to being slightly distracted by the soundtrack from the point that the former president is making. But basically, I mean, and I remember thinking this too, or I should say, if you covered Capitol Hill before January 6th, right, there was a sense from so many lawmakers in both parties, but certainly with Republicans, that something like what then happened on January 6th couldn't happen here. He seems to be saying broadly that the world is different now, and that the things that we have seen happen in countries that have ended up with authoritarian regimes, that it could happen in the United States.
Look, I mean, I think this is very much a post-January 6th conversation, obviously, and I think that he is talking about, he's been giving a lot of speeches to civic groups and younger groups as well about sort of the rightward shift. And one question I have, he doesn't do many interviews. He does the podcasts and things, like he does mainly friendly interviews. To what degree does he sort of hold himself responsible, or what is the reaction to his presidency with the rise of Donald Trump? I saw that Kristen Isolde Anderson was asking that question in a chat on the side there, and that is such a central question here, because it's interwoven. It's absolutely interwoven. The rise of Donald Trump obviously started during the Obama presidency, and it has certainly continued since then. So those two men are interwoven in American history in a way that I can't think of any presidents that necessarily are. Of course, Obama was a correction to Bush, if you will, on the Iraq War and other things, but the Trump-Obama sort of
Obama
relationship is interesting.
I think you're exactly right. I mean, Obama's presidency delivered Trump, and then Biden's presidency delivered Trump stronger than ever. So that Obama-Biden political era, I mean, the net result of it is that Donald Trump is now one of the strongest presidents in the modern American political era. That is the net result.
Casey, as we think about democracies, one thing that is good for democracies are stable, vibrant middle classes, and people sort of having aspirational ability to move up. And I think one thing that's happened since the financial collapse of 2009, 2010, is people have lost that faith that that's going to happen. I think that is not something we can ignore as we look at the rise of the sort of authoritarian, strong man government around the world.
Yeah, fair point for sure.